Hi guys, welcome back to Nyx Reads. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to subscribe if you love watching bookish videos, and give this video a thumbs up if you are just excited as I am to hear about everybody's favorite books of 2023. It took me a while, but I managed to identify the top 15 books I read last year within the 80+ books that I have finished. I'm genuinely excited to share all of these titles with you. I really hope that at least one of them will make it onto your TBR. I tried my best to rank them, so I'm gonna go from spot 15, and the last book is gonna be my top book of the year that takes the #1 spot. Regardless of the number rank, I loved all of these books and I hope you'll like them too. Coming in at number 15, we have The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This nonfiction deserves all the recognition for shining a light on Henrietta Lacks, the woman behind the infamous HeLa cells. In the 50s in the US, Henrietta Lacks's cancerous cells while she was at a Johns Hopkins hospital were taken without her consent, and these cells were the first immortal cells that were ever created, meaning that her cells were grown in cell culture. Numerous medical achievements were made based off of those cells, including, for example, the polio vaccine. Without those cells, we wouldn't have that. The author uncovered Henrietta's story for over a decade to find the identity of the woman behind these HeLa cells, to learn what happened to her during her lifetime, but also what happened to Henrietta's family and generations after her. Her family only learned 20 years after her death what was happening with her cells. This is truly an incredible piece of nonfiction work, and anybody who reads nonfiction, I really recommend this too. Next at number 14, we have Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. I had to give this book a spot in my top 15 because this one features one of my favorite, or if not my favorite, literary couples of 2023. Just so you know, this is not so much a horror story in my opinion, but a historical love story that is set in 1840s Mexico, where not only Anglo settlers from the north, but also vampires threaten Nena's family and her village. She and her childhood friend and first love Nestor gets tragically separated when they were younger, and the book really picks up when they are starting to find their ways back to each other. Their innermost thoughts and desires and fears, their inner monologues were just such a treat to read, and I'm going to keep it short here because I have a separate video up just dedicated to review this book, so you can check that out if you want to, but this is a great love story. Next, for number 13, I have Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup by John Carreyrou. This is the nonfiction about Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. So this is the jaw-dropping true story about how this startup was supposed to revolutionize the medical industry worldwide and change how blood tests are done forever. But the company Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes went from being worth billions of dollars to zero, because it turns out that everything was one big lie. The author John Carreyrou is the Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who got the initial tip from one of the Theranos workers that something is very wrong in this startup. I read this after watching The Dropout on Disney Plus, where Amanda Seyfried plays Elizabeth Holmes, because I just wanted more. The story is just unbelievable. Needless to say, I ate this book up. It has such an addictive quality to it. This is a great nonfiction pick. Spot number 12 is a much lighter pick. It's Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare. This one's the superlative of the most fun book I read in 2023. There was no other book where I enjoyed myself so much whenever I picked this book up. This romance is genuinely funny. I laughed out loud so many times. I was chuckling to myself while reading it. I thought the spice was well written, and the best thing about this book were really the quirky characters. So Reggie Johnson answers a job ad in a newspaper, but she thinks she's gonna work for a playing card company, but in reality, she becomes a familiar to an actual witch. It so happens that Reggie doesn't believe in magic, so the witch's nephew, Ben, is very skeptical and is not happy with his aunt's choice of a new familiar. Obviously, he happens to be very hot, and sparks fly, and initially they really dislike each other, but then they have to come and work together because something strange starts happening in the witch's household. This was such a joyful treat. If you are a romance reader, please do yourself a favor and put this on your TBR, specifically for next fall or autumn. Great book. Coming in at number 11, we have a speculative fiction sci-fi book. It's Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This is your time traveling trope book done absolutely right for me personally. On Halloween night, Jen witnesses her 18-year-old son stab a stranger in front of their house. She is shocked, she doesn't know what's going on, and the next day she wakes up and it is the day before Halloween. So from there on out, she keeps traveling back in time and she's sent on this wild goose chase, not knowing what she's even looking for, but trying to find ways to save her son in the future, to try to save him from killing a strange man. The pacing of the story is great. It is way more profound than I thought it would be, and it's just such a successful version of this trope. I did not see the ending coming at all. It was a big surprise for me. This was a page turner that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I really recommend it if you love time travel. At number 10, I have another nonfiction. It's In the Dream House by Carmen Machado. This is to date the most unique memoir I have ever read. In this, the author writes about the abusive same-sex relationship she was in. I cannot put into words how inventive and exceptional the concept of this book is. I would just ask you to go and try it for yourself. Just read the first 2 chapters so that you understand how big this project of a book is. Every chapter takes on a new angle to the situation. So a chapter will be called The Dream House as the Prisoner's Dilemma, or The Dream House as Schrödinger's Cat, or The Dream House as an actual place. This is a very candid recounting of her experiences, and it's also very nuanced. The author also puts their inner struggles in context by deep diving more into the topic of abusive queer relationships in general. If you read memoirs and you're not opposed to reading a memoir about the topic of abuse, then please pick this up. This is obviously a very hard read, but it is a piece of art. At number 9, I have a book that is from one of my favorite authors, Catriona Ward. It's Looking Glass Sound. It came out last year. This one is a mind-bending meta-contextual maze, meaning if you like the sound of a book in a book in a book, then this one is for you. This psychological horror takes place at the coast of Maine, where Wilder Harlow summers with his parents. Later, he writes a memoir about one particular summer where he comes to that seaside town with his parents, and it starts out as almost a coming-of-age story where he meets new friends, but it takes a very dark turn because a killer stalks the seaside town. So that murderous storyline is horrifying and twisted in itself, but it gets even weirder when that manuscript gets stolen by someone and the story becomes a story within a story within a story, you could say. And this is where it really becomes the multi-layered mind-f, and it was at times hard to follow, but there was just so much to unpack. If you don't mind feeling confused at times and you like mind-bending stories, then this is amazing, especially if you enjoy horror. I know I say this technically about every single Catriona Ward book I say, but this is just another psychological horror like no other I have read before. It is amazing, and I need to reread this. At number 8, I have technically a reread, but the first time around I read this book, I only gave it a 3-star rating. I didn't get it, but this time around it was a 5-star new favorite. It's The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is a modern horror classic. If you in any way are interested in the haunted house trope, this is a must-read. Not only is this book iconic for obviously the supernatural occurrences that happen within Hill House, but this is an excellent study of what happens to a person when they feel socially isolated. In this story, Dr. Montagu gathers a group of people to perform a research project at Hill House. Some of these people have very unusual talents, if you will. Not only is the house itself and the things that happen in it creepy, but also Nell, one of the main characters, is a fascinating character study. She's a character that has very questionable thoughts and does and say questionable things. And one of the scariest aspects for me while reading this is how I think everybody of us has a little bit of Nell in them. This is an amazing book, highly recommend. At number 7, I have once again a horror story. I think we're seeing a theme in this top 15. So I have Comfort Me with Apples by Catherynne M. Valente. This short horror novella feels like a fever dream. You instantly get a creepy feeling when you start this book that something is very, very wrong. Our main character, Sophia, lives a perfect life in her perfect house in Arcadia Gardens and has her perfect husband. Sometimes though, she does wonder about questions that her husband won't answer and strange objects she finds around the house. And then there's the basement with the locked door that she's not allowed to go in. I would describe the experience of reading this like a fairy tale with a horror twist. And if that sounds good to you, then I think you should read this. It's very short. I am definitely due for a reread because especially now that I know how it ends, which I didn't necessarily see that coming. That was a surprise. I feel like I'm going to read this through a different lens, which makes this even more enjoyable. I think this book takes an unexpected direction, and I personally really enjoyed this horror novella. At number 6, I have a book that I read in the very beginning of last year. It's The Last Chance Library by Freya Sampson. This is featuring one of my favorite tropes, which is a shy and reclusive female lead that has to break out of her shell and starts living her life. Obviously, along the way, she will also make new friends. June is a librarian in a small English village, but her library is threatened for closure. So she has to come together with the community and is forced to make her voice heard to try to save this library. There's also a little love story in here, but it does not take the center. It is just the perfect feel-good story for me. I read it at the exact right time, so this absolutely worked. If you like the sound of that and you could use a cozy book to pick you up right now, then please put this on your TBR. This was so enjoyable. We are now in my top 5 favorites. So at number 5, we have Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I read this also in the beginning of last year and I knew instantly that it's gonna make my top 5. It's that good. This book is a melancholic treat, I would say, where a same-sex couple is going through an unimaginable experience. Leah is a marine biologist who was lost at sea for a few months because the submarine where she was part of an expedition on sank to the bottom of the ocean floor. Her wife Miri lives in complete uncertainty during that time. She doesn't know if her wife is dead. But when Leah suddenly returns, she herself is obviously dealing with the trauma that she has to process from being caged in that submarine for such a long time and what happened down there, while Miri is trying to deal with a wife who is showing some very odd behavior. There's also a little bit of body horror in this. This is a book where the absolute bizarre is perfectly paired with the story of an estranged romantic relationship. And this book has the most perfect not just the last, but the last 2 chapters. They're what pushed me to give this book a 5 stars. I loved this book. I need to read more from this author. At number 4, I have Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. This is an amazing murder mystery a la Agatha Christie, set within a murder mystery. So this is once again a book in a book. Famous author Alan Conway has just submitted his newest script that is once again a murder mystery featuring his detective Atticus Punt. It is set in a sleepy English village, and Hugh are reading this manuscript alongside his editor Susan Ryland. So you both are reading this, and as the editor keeps going through the manuscript, she notices that there's a few storylines a bit too close to reality and a second mystery unfolds. This is superb. If you love murder mysteries, then you have to pick this up. It is so well done, and I like how the author was able to change the narrative voice so many times within the book. I cannot wait to pick up the second book this year, but this also can stand on its own. Now we are officially in my top 3 books of 2023. At spot number 3, I have One of the Good Guys by Araminta Hall. This is coming out this January 9th. Run to get this book if you care about feminism. This goes into the topic of misogyny, violence against women, the patriarchy, and even fertility. This book enraged me like no other I read last year. In the story, Cole is a good guy who is newly separated from his wife, and he moves from the city to a seaside town where he meets a very reclusive artist, Lenny. While Cole is trying to build a new life, at the same time we have 2 young female activists who were planning to do a march to raise awareness for violence against women. Those 2 women suddenly disappear, and Cole happens to be the last person who saw them. That is where things get very, very weird and a bit unhinged. This book stirred up so many emotions, and it takes quite a strange and you might even say extreme turn, but for me it worked. So many horrible things are happening to female characters aggregated in a short novel, and it's upsetting that all of this happens in real life as well, but it is directly addressed in this book. This book is in my top 3 of all the books I read last year. It is such an important read, and one of my favorite quotes from this book is, "Men like Cole believe they're right because society has told them that they are their whole lives. And as a result, they find it hard when things are denied them." At spot number 2, I have 15 Dogs by André Alexis. This book made me stare into the void and think about the meaning of life. This will make you contemplate humanity. The premise is that the 2 gods, Hermes and Apollo, have a bet where one bets the other that if dogs had human consciousness and language, they would be more miserable than human beings. So they end up granting 50 dogs in a Toronto vet clinic human language and consciousness. And the results are not pretty. The dogs start feeling alienated. They start to question their canine existence and what the meaning of their lives are. It's also interesting to see how they change their interactions with humans and other dogs after the change. These dogs thrown into an existential crisis made me sad and at times upset. And there's also a bit of violence in here. So it is not just a fun thought experiment like I thought it would be. This is extremely profound. I enjoyed this. Every single page was such a treat. For anybody who likes reading fiction with philosophical questions in them, or if you enjoyed the show The Good Place, then you must read this. Although this novel won quite a few Canadian literature prizes, I don't really see this book being discussed on BookTube, so here I am putting this book in front of you. Please, please pick this up. It is that good. And the number 1 spot is taken by Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This blew me away. It is one of the best fantasy books that I've read and one of the best openings to a fantasy series. This book weaves together so many topics, but absolutely expertly done. So first and foremost, it's about the Arthurian legend, including Merlin, the Round Table of Knights, but this is also about grief, about trauma, about ancestry, about African American history, about family drama, and of course, magic. This is technically a YA book, which is why it was partly surprising for me that I enjoyed this so much and it made it to my best book of 2023, but it doesn't read as such. It's very mature. If this was marketed as just an adult fantasy book, I don't think I would have noticed a big difference. Our main character is 16-year-old Bree Matthews, who gets admitted to an early residential program at UNC Chapel Hill, which is a university in North Carolina. It exists in real life. Bree recently lost her mother, so she's dealing with that grief. And one of the reasons she attends UNC Chapel Hill is because that's also where her mother went when she was alive. And it turns out that not only is there magic in this world, but magic might have had something to do with her mother's death. Bree slowly starts to learn that the Arthurian legend is not just a legend, and it has something to do with her family's ancestry. I cannot believe how successful this fantasy book is, and it has so many important messages about family as well. I absolutely adored this fantasy book. I cannot wait to pick up the next one. I heard it's even better than this. I mean, this was already 5 stars for me, so I don't know where else to go from here. So that is the top 15 books I read. I tried to be as concise as I could because that's quite a few books to go through. I hope I was able to convey how much I love these books and why they made my top list. Please let me know if any of these books interest you, and if you have read them already, what did you think of them? If you want to let me know that you're still watching, then why don't you leave me a flame emoji? And do not forget to let me know what your favorite book of 2023 is. If you also have uploaded a favorites book on your YouTube channel, please don't be shy to leave me a comment down below and tell me to check out your video. I like these videos to also find new booktubers to watch. I had such an amazing reading year. It was hard for me to make this selection, and I hope you had a great reading year as well, and 2024 is hopefully filled with amazing books for all of us once again. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.